about the significance of the FCC decision?
I mean, this is simply a historic decision. It was a long time, as you said, in the making. Some of us have been working on this, me personally, for 13 years. And I think it just sets us on a different path. It says that, there need to be basic rules of the road for the Internet, and we're not going to trust cable and telephone companies to respect freedom of speech or respect new innovators because of their poor track record. So I think it's a major step forward, a huge legacy achievement for both the Obama administration and this chairman, Tom Wheeler. And there's a sense of jubilation here in Washington.
And, Tim, the decision of Verizon, for example, to blast this with in Morse code, as if referring back to a previous communication era, I was struck by the fact that I don't think Verizon sees the irony of its actions, because the old telegraph because of lack of government regulation, became largely a Western Union monopoly and out of the reach of ordinary Americans, and was only used by the wealthy. So they're actually using the old Morse code telegraph analogy to buttress an argument that is clearly bankrupt at this point in terms of the failure of the modern communications companies to be able to allow and to maintain public access.
I think they need some new talking points. Having been in this debate for over a decade, they're still relying on the same kind of Bush-era arguments where they say, hands off the Internet. They just say the same thing, telemedicine, there's going to be 5, 10 competitors in this market. Everyone has watched the broadband market, which used to have hundreds of competitors in the Clinton era in the early 90s, go to more and more consolidation. They keep saying competition and random things. And their talking points have worn out. They don't even connect with anyone. I mean, right or left, they've kind of lost touch. And that's why they were so defeated in this latest round, is I just think they kept saying the same things, but no one was listening. And therefore, the commission, to its credit, really did what the people wanted. And I think when you look at polls, most people say, how do you feel about cable or the phone companies putting up slow lanes, slowing down some traffic and speeding up? Then people are like, we don't like that. It's not just a Democrat side. It's nobody likes that. So I think they're just really haven't done a good job. If there is a case to be made on their side, they haven't done it.
So can you explain exactly what Title II is and how exactly the Internet will be regulated?
Sure. Well, I'll explain it. So in 1934, this is the illusion that Verizon is making. The New Deal Congress created the Federal Communications Commission, gave it a broad authority to regulate everything by wire, all communications by wire. And their idea back then was to control the problem of monopoly power that was manifest actually in the earlier version of Verizon named AT&T. And it is basically at its centerpiece, net neutrality, a non-discrimination rule. Frankly, it just keeps the Internet the way it is now and just makes it very clear to the phone and cable companies, you can't block anything. You might not like a website that says Verizon's too expensive. You can't block that. You can't degrade service. And you can't set up what are called slow lanes. That is to say, you can't go around and say, hey, if you don't want to be slowed down, you need to pay us more money. That kind of a protection scheme. So those don't seem very outrageous to most Americans, and frankly, they're not, which is what has been challenging for the telecom lobby, is those seem like very straightforward. They're frankly the way the Internet is. And just to add one last point, we've had some kind of net neutrality rules for a very long time. The reason we're here is because Verizon sued to strike them down. And so, they've got themselves, Title II just refers to a stronger way of supporting the law. And now that's what Verizon and the cable industry has gotten themselves into.
And the importance of the FCC extending this not just to broadband cable, but also to mobile devices?
Yeah, this is a major victory which goes way beyond frankly, what the first administration, the first Obama administration did. The chairman recognized, and I think a lot of people have been saying for a long time, that a lot of broadband's moving to wireless, and so to just say, oh, you can do whatever you want on wireless, but on broadband doesn't make sense. And so they just extended the principle of net neutrality to wireless, where de facto it's basically been in operation anyways. And so I think that's a big step forward as well.
Tim Wu, you have a very interesting history, how you came to be involved with the Internet and coin the term net neutrality. I don't think a lot of people know. Well, you ran for lieutenant governor here in New York. But way before that, you clerked for Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. And talk about even before that, how you came to be involved with the Internet. Give us a brief little CV.
Well, sure. I think we talked about this years ago, back in the early days. I was in Silicon Valley in the early 2000s, right when the big center of the boom. And I worked for a telecom company who made the stuff that was going to attack or destroy net neutrality. And we were trying to sell it to the Chinese government to sort of censor stuff, and also trying to sell it to American cable companies. And, I was a fairly loyal employee, but after a while I said, this stuff stinks. It's going to make the Internet terrible. Because I had been, even earlier than that, I've been kind of a computer programmer. I'm, good old-fashioned computer geek. And so I just saw that this is really a threat. And so when I came to academia, the very first thing I did was say, we need this principle called net neutrality. And, at the time, nobody paid any attention. But somehow it caught on. And, 13 years later, I guess, starting with that just innate sense of, I think, repelled. The idea that the Internet would become like cable television, just this kind of crappy, sorry if we're on cable ourselves, but, just like, whatever makes money is the only thing that survives. I just thought, this is terrible. And so it was really from a personal place. And, now 13 years later, I guess it was worth it.
And for a time also, you had a good relationship with Michael Powell, the former FCC chair under George W. Bush. Now you're clearly on opposite sides with him on this issue.
Well, to give Michael Powell a little bit of credit, he actually, to some degree, got the net neutrality thing started. No person is completely good or completely bad in what they do. And he recognized that there was a threat to the Internet, too, from the phone companies and cable companies. And he was the first, when he was the chairman, to do a net neutrality order, actually under Title II, where there was a company a phone company that was blocking voice over Internet. And he said, you can't do that. And he fined them. So he was tough. He is one of the people who started this. Now, as the head of the Cable Trade Association, he's had a different tune. But he actually was an enforcer who started this. So he gets a little bit of credit, even though he might not want to take it.
It's very interesting that Michael Powell, the son of Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State in general, who was head of the FCC, comes to head the Cable Lobbying Association that the current chair, Tom Wheeler, came from. Do you think, how did Tom Wheeler get religion? Has he talked to you about this epiphany? I mean, we had the images of the protesters in front of his home not letting him go to work, saying, if this is how you're going to work, we don't want you to go to work. The encampment outside the FCC that went on for many days.
I think it's really important never to typecast people entirely and be like, this guy is a lobbyist, or this guy's, a lot of people were worried, particularly in the progressive movement, that former lobbyist, he was just going to show up at the FCC and do his former master's bidding or something. But, he's near the end of his career. He's not looking for another job. And, he became a net neutrality advocate I think when you get in the job, you start to see sort of the wisdom of this position. It is a universal and ancient principle preventing non-discrimination in public infrastructure, whether it's the roads, sidewalks, whatever. And, you look at this idea of fast lane, slow lane. So I think gradually, and then you saw the comments. And when you're actually in the job, Michael Powell's another example, and you see what could happen to the Internet, you think, like, that is no good. I think anyone who directly experiences this has that feeling. And so, yes, by the way, it is a textbook case of grassroots organizing. Maybe we'll talk about this later. But there was no one with any money or any power on the side of net neutrality. There were academics, a group like Fight for the Future, Free Press, activist groups. But the message was really strong. And finally, the 4 million Americans who wrote the agency really made a difference. And really, the president himself getting involved, all these things. So Tom Wheeler really changed his tune on this. And it just shows you really shouldn't typecast anyone.
And Tim, I wanted to ask you, this is not a new fight, because clearly if those who are familiar with some of the history of mass communications know that ever since the computer, the personal computer was created, there's been a constant debate of the relationship between the personal computer and the communications lines, originally the old phone lines and now broadband. And this has been an ongoing battle over how the American people are going to get their information. So this is really only the latest stage of this, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It goes back to the telegraph, where I don't want to, go on too much about history, but the 19th century, the telegraph had such control over the wire news that they would use their power to try to throw elections to the Republican Party. It has been the tension between the people who own the wires and the stuff on top of the wires has been with us since the wires existed. And I don't think it goes away. That's why I think it's, at some level, there's always needs to be government oversight. There's too much power in private hands when someone owns the master switch, to use my book's title. And we have seen this before. We saw it with AT&T. We've seen it over the radio waves, with the broadcast networks. There isn't, everyone knows this, but, the revolutionaries take over the radio stations, and now they take over the internet sites. First, because there is an enormous amount of power, and unchecked private power is a dangerous thing.
Last year, comedian John Oliver dedicated nearly 15 minutes of his HBO program to explain why net neutrality is so important, and ended the show with a call to his viewers to write to the FCC to encourage them to adopt the new rules. The enormous response broke the Commission's website. This is a clip from last week tonight.
For once in your life, we need you to channel that anger, that badly spelled bile that you normally reserve for unforgivable attacks on actresses you seem to think have put on weight, or politicians that you disagree with, or photos of your ex-girlfriend getting on with her life, or non-white actors being cast as fictional characters. And I'm talking to you, Ron Paul fan 2016, and you, One Direction forever, and I'm talking to you, One Direction sucks balls. We need you to get out there and for once in your lives, focus your indiscriminate rage in a useful direction. Seize your moment, my lovely trolls. Turn on caps lock and fly, my pretties.
That is HBO comedian John Oliver on his program Pushing for Net Neutrality. Finally, Tim Wu, on this day, your thoughts about if Aaron Swartz, the young Internet activist who unfortunately took his life a few years ago, what his feelings would be today as he dedicated his life to net neutrality.
Yeah, no, I mean, yesterday and we were having a celebration party in D.C., and it was one of these moments. Someone said, "This is a moment for hugs." Like, everybody was just so jubilant. We spent, it's tough when you work on progressive causes. You're always outgunned, outspent, and people burn out because it just takes so much energy. And Aaron Swartz was the kind of guy who dedicated his life to these causes. And, he should have been there. I think a lot of people should have been there, but it was at least one great moment for those who've patiently been sticking it out, and I salute all of the people who've worked tirelessly for low ounce money now for over a decade to try and fight for an open internet. That was his fight, that was our fight, and yesterday was a day of triumph.